Welcome back to our program. I'm your host, Ray Guo. In this segment, we will continue our conversation with Mr. Garry Huang, who is originally from Taiwan, but grew up in Australia, and he is a civil engineer and project manager by trade. I'm going to ask him about his experiences in those areas. Garry, you've been a civil engineering and also in project management for most of your career. And you've been involved in quite a few number of formidable infrastructure projects. Can you then share with us some of the experiences? This is the other job that you have. In terms of being a project manager, a civil engineer. How is that different from your other volunteer duties at St. John's Ambulance?
One of the most memorable projects that I've worked on is in Sydney. It was called the Warragamba Deepwater Access Project. And that particular project involved the excavation and the decontamination of a 75-year-old pump station at our the biggest dam in Sydney that supplies 90% of the water, the fresh water
to the residents.
To the residents.
Yes.
And the access to that particular pump room, which is about 70 meters underneath a sandstone rock, is probably about an access hole of about 2 by 2 square meters, or 2 meters by 2 meters.
Yes.
And basically you go in there and you climb down this flight of stairs. It's about 70 meters deep, and then you access into this cavern. And the project itself presented itself with various challenges, such as decontaminating the entire pump room, and then installation and then the excavation of an access hole, and then the installation of a new pump station or pump room. And that project itself lasted about 1.5 years to 2 years.
Okay.
And the project cost was about 170 million Australian dollars, and it was a very challenging project. Although I was only involved from the second half of the project, but just being able to be on that project team certainly allowed me to gain valuable experiences on the water industry and the wastewater industry as well.
I suppose some of the experiences that you accumulated from, as a project manager also helps you in terms of your volunteer work with, St. John's Ambulance. And also the fact is that, there are, some experiences, I suppose, are helping each other. In terms of, for example, if you're involved in a project that's, on the infrastructure in Australia, and in the future, God forbid that something should happen there in a major rescue event, that maybe your knowledge about that, the infrastructure project that you're involved with, could also help you in terms of providing first aid assistance to the people who are in need on site. Has that ever, occurred to you? Yeah.
Of course. As a project manager, the most important thing there is the same as first aid.
Exactly.
It's about stakeholder management. It's managing the expectations of all the stakeholders. And communications within your team members is absolutely vital to the success of the project. What we have is basically outlay what people can expect from our services and what people will receive at the end of the day. And as long as these two match, then you've got a successful completion of the project, and everyone can go home happy.
Okay.
And that's pretty much the same as first aid.
Exactly.
You have certain expectations on what you can and can't do, and as long as they match up at the end of the day, everyone goes home happy.
Okay. So can you then share with us that in the two different roles, a project manager on one hand and also a volunteer with St. John's Ambulance, there are many, many experiences that are actually complementary to each other. One will help you to be a better project manager, and conversely, the other one will help you, to be a more competent, more involved, volunteer with St. John's Ambulance. Has that been the case with you?
It has been the case as well. As a project manager, you're also faced with challenges
exactly.
of managing what I would call unexpected events is a polite way to put it. And certainly being a first aid provider has certainly given me the skills to react to these events. So say for example on a project, a client might ring up and say, oh, hold on a sec, what's happened here? Why is this not what we expect, or so on and so forth? And the ability to actually respond to that at the very first instance and manage the situation is a skill that I've learnt partly through my project management profession, and also partly through my first aid
volunteer work
career, I suppose.
Yeah. Okay.
And they've certainly been complementary to each other, and being able to implement this set of skills has certainly provided me or enabled me to be a better project manager and a first aid provider.
I suppose as a project manager, you have projects all over different parts of Australia, or just in the Sydney area where you live?
The projects that I manage are mostly in the regional New South Wales.
Okay.
I've worked at a place called Lismore in New South Wales, and it's a small country town.
Okay.
And I've also worked at different areas, but the projects that I manage are mostly in the New South Wales, state of New South Wales.
Okay.
But geographically, it's very
it's
sparse.
very large.
That's
yes.
correct.
Yeah, and also the fact is Australia is also a multi-ethnic society. You're occasionally may run into somebody with a completely different cultural ethnic background as yours. How difficult is it then, as a project manager, in terms of communicating your ideas, your knowledge about the project with others who may be also involved in the process?
This issue I would probably classify it as a cultural management.
Okay.
And in Australia, certainly there's a lot of people from a variety of cultures.
Exactly.
And I think the most important thing is to actually obtain an understanding and appreciation of their culture. There is absolutely no point trying to enforce your personal beliefs on them. Okay. Because if you do that, the only thing that you'll get in return is hate, and then probably disloyalty and resistance.
Of course.
But if you can have an understanding and appreciation of their particular culture, and also introduce the benefits of your culture to them as well, I think as a society as a whole will only benefit through multicultural, multicultures, and if everyone can appreciate that and enjoy the best of every society and every culture, I think it'll make the place a better place.
And in your experience as a project manager, have you come across occasions when coordination fails, when communication didn't work, and how do you then, try to get a project, continue, in the direction, in the progress that you would like? How do you overcome, those difficulties?
Right. So when communication fails and culture fails, but you've basically missed your target as a project manager.
Yes.
What you need to do, or what I have done in that situation, is basically sit down the project team and basically lay out the table and say, look, what are the issues? What's causing everyone the problem? What's causing the resistance? And basically, if everyone can be frank with me, which I encourage them to be, and I can have a better understanding of what the situation and the issue is, and if I have a good understanding of what the issue is, then I can certainly address that.
And in your experiences growing up in Australia, has this multicultural development in the society itself been helpful in terms of your growing up, in terms of being adapted, assimilated into the Australian society?
It certainly has. I think what I have a good appreciation of now is what each culture is like. Although I don't have, obviously I don't have the in-depth knowledge of what a practicing Muslim might be, or an Anglo-Saxon society might be, but at least I have a broad knowledge of what each society, how each of them behave and react and act in a society, and what their values are. And that's certainly been a great help with me growing up, because that means I can interact with people from all across the world. I can interact with Australians, with Americans, with Muslims, with Chinese people of Chinese descent. Yes. And I can always certainly blend in with them, because I know and I have a good understanding of their culture and their values. Yeah.
Garry, you were born in Taiwan, and you left Taiwan at the age of?
8. I was 8 years old.
Okay, so you're only second grade. Okay.
That's correct.
So you've been in Australia since you turned 8. So all these years in Australia, how do you maintain the contact and connections with Taiwan? Do you have family relatives still here?
Yes, my parents spend most of their time in Taiwan, and the extended family are basically still residing in Taipei. In the last couple of years, I come back to Taiwan a bit more often, probably about once or twice every 3 years.
Okay, good.
And certainly that allows me to bring my family back to Taiwan to visit relatives, and bring my children back to Taiwan as well to introduce to them the roots,
yes.
and allow them to actually have an appreciation and understanding of what where the parents grew up and what the society's like here, rather than just have a shielded view of what the world looks like from the view of Sydney. They can also experience the view of the world from different countries as well, and I think that's been beneficial to the growing up.
Did you think that your 8 years in Taiwan, when after you were born here, and then before you emigrated to Australia, did you think this 8 years, especially the 2 years when you were in elementary school here, did that help you in terms of your schooling, in terms of making friends and developing interpersonal skills after you got into Australia?
I must admit, I don't recall much of my life in Taiwan. Probably the first 4 or 5 years has been a complete blank to me. But I do have a couple of good friends that I still maintain contact with, and every year when I come back to Taiwan, I do catch up with them, go out for a few drinks, and have dinner together, and so on and so forth.
Good.
And I think that allows me to reconnect with my youth as well, and it makes me remember who I am and where I was born.
Okay, good. And we're going to take another short break on our program. And when we come back, we'll get even more personal with Mr. Garry Huang. We're going to talk about his, experience in Australia, both, going to school and also working and starting a family in Australia. We'll be right back.